Hello and welcome to the Kristy Wettering's The Career Booster podcast. This podcast is for women who are unhappy in their job and who want to find their dream career or business. In this episode, I'm going to talk to a very special guest, namely Josselyne Herman-Saccio, about how to keep on going in challenging times. And Josselyne is an author, master coach with more than 30 years of experience, former pop star, entrepreneur, and founder of a non-profit. She has coached more than 200,000 people and specializes in what she calls the art of being unmessable with. Hi, Josselyne, and welcome.
Hi. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really happy you're here.
Me too.
So I want you to ask you to just please explain what is the art of being unmessable with all about?
Yes, well, I'd like to start by what it isn't, because people sometimes hear the word unmessable with and they think it means being tough, or people can't get to me, or I'm not going to feel my feeling. And that's not what it is at all. What I mean by being unmessable with is that no matter what life is throwing at you, no matter where you are, who you're with, what circumstance you're dealing with, that you're able to stay in that world of creation and fulfillment versus get thrown into the world of reaction, or what I say being messable with, when you're hooked or reactivated or, stopped or thwarted or down for the count completely. It's about moving from that world of reaction to the world of creation.
And what would your advice be for women who are feeling stuck in their career and they hear all this and they're like, okay, that's all very nice, but I don't even know what my passion or my purpose is. Like, what advice do you have for them? Like, how do they find out what is their passion? What is their purpose?
Yeah, many people are not connected to their passion or purpose. The first thing you need to do is clear enough out of the way so that you can begin to look up and out. We talk about vision as, synonymous with vision and passion and purpose, but vision has to do with being able to see. And if you have all this stuff you're dealing with and all this stuff you're messed with by, you can't see anything. It's like, trying to see in front of you, you got a big rock in front of you, you can't see past it. So the first thing I would do is work on distinguishing and identifying all the things that are in the way. What are the concerns? What are the limiting beliefs? What are the negative self-talk? The things that are messing with you, so that you can dissect them enough to give them some malleability and have them dissipate a bit, so you can have some room to look up and out. If you weren't dealing with that, what could you want? If you weren't, obsessed with or myopically focused on that thing, and you kind of step to the side and look in a different direction, what is it that you start to see formulating and emerging as something that might connect with you? And if you can't see it from the future, I work with people to go back to the past, because everybody's got moments in their life that were inspiring to them. And you can get a sense of what somebody's purpose is from moments like that in their past as well.
But what about women who have been doing the whole lives the same, thing? They're in this corporate job and it's not making them happy, but they think, yeah, but I'm already so old, how am I going to now find something else or study something else? Like, is it not too late? What would your advice be?
Well, I would say it's never too late. I mean, I work with people from all ages, and including 80 years old. And that's a lot older than probably most of the people listening to your podcast. And, somebody who had a dream of being an artist and they had never done it because they had a company their whole life and never felt like they could, take the risk. And they've been able to recreate themselves as an artist and taking the actions to fulfill on that and have the actual results in reality. And it doesn't mean you have to quit your job right away. If you're in a job, you don't have to be like, okay, that's it, I won't be able to pay the rent and I'm going to go start this. But you can have parallel pathways, is what I call it. So you start to create a parallel pathway of something that, you love, or something that you think you might like, because then you can try stuff out without a lot of risk. If you think you might like being a beautician, you can relate to that, right? You don't have to quit your day job and then, go work at Sephora. You could actually just kind of dabble in it And again, that has a lot to do with structuring your life and your calendar in a way where you can have it all, because having it all doesn't mean doing it all. And a lot of times it means delegating things that are delegatable. And most people don't do that. Most people just do everything and then they're exhausted and overwhelmed. I work with people on a whole world of never having to be overwhelmed again. I say overwhelm is optional, and I haven't been overwhelmed. I can't remember a time I was overwhelmed. Maybe I was overwhelmed like when I was 20 or something, but I have 3 children. I was the, president of the PTA. I worked in the community. I have a nonprofit. I have a company. I worked for Lamb. I mean, I have, a full life, and I haven't been overwhelmed. So it's definitely optional.
So you definitely have like a super strong mindset. And I think a lot of women, they really want, okay, maybe some women are thinking, okay, then I'll go study something else. Okay. But they have so many limiting beliefs and so many worries and doubts that it's very difficult for them to move past that.
Yes.
And what would your advice be to them to build like a stronger mindset so that they can actually dare to get out of their comfort zone? And
yeah, it's not only mindset, it's actions. So that is exactly what I work on with people, because most people, their muscle for reacting is very strong and their muscle for creating is like atrophied. So it is a science to it. It's not just the art of being unmessable with, there's a science to it. If you have an overcompensating muscle and you have a weak, atrophied, flappy muscle, you got to work this muscle out and stop working this one. So I work with people to create actual exercises. I mean, there's all sorts of ways people can do this, but a lot of it has to do with just little things, starting with little things where you say something and then you take action on what you created. Even if it's, something small, like, okay, I'm going to, go to the gym 3 times a week, whatever it is that you created, and then fulfill on it rather than getting stopped by a reason. Oh, I'm too tired. Oh, I'm too old. Oh, I'm too this, I'm too that, whatever. Those reasons are the same thing that stop you from fulfilling on your dreams. It's the same stuff. So, whether it's going to the gym or, writing that report or writing that proposal and asking for investors, whatever messes with you in one area messes with you everywhere. So the first thing is to identify what messes with you, dismantle it, and create a strategy for a pathway to a new road, because your neuronal pathways are very grooved into being in those worlds of reasons, like, oh, I don't know what I want. Oh, maybe I can't do it. I don't have the resources. I don't have the time. All that kind of stuff is strong. It's like a totally paved road. The road of creation has branches and rocks, and you got to carve that road. So it takes discipline and muscle, and you have to have compassion for yourself. It's not going to be super strong in the beginning. You have to build it like any muscle.
Yeah, I think it's really about taking action, like what you say, because a lot of people think, okay, well, creating a positive mindset is just thinking positive thoughts all day, but that's really not what's going to get you from A to B. I think it really indeed is taking action, because the more action you take, the more confident you become, and you actually see, oh, I can do it. Like a stupid example, I'm doing CrossFit every day now, and I'm now doing things that I never thought I was able to do. And that's boosting my confidence and my mindset. And then I'm thinking, well, if I can do this in CrossFit and I thought I would never be able to do it, then what can I do in my business, or what can I do in my personal life?
Totally. I mean, listen, when I was in my early 20s, I was raising money for a charity for kids. And I created what's called a parachute-a-thon. So you would get paid by the foot, like people would sponsor you like a walkathon. They sponsored you by the foot. So if it's 10,000 feet and they sponsored you a penny, it would add up to whatever it added up to. So I organized this thing, and I've never jumped out of a plane, but I was like committed to the kids, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to raise this money for the kids. And we raised a lot of money, and I personally raised a lot of money to do this. Then I get to the jump with like 12 other people, and they start explaining how this is going to go. And I am like, am I insane? I'm going to jump out of a plane. They're explaining how you could die. I'm like, this was a bad idea. All my reasons, all my considerations, my fears, everything showed up like really, really loud. Everything that messed with me, right? And then there's like, and at the time I was engaged to be married, not to my actual husband, but I was engaged to be married. And there were 2 jump masters that you could be attached to, because, it was a tandem jump. And one of them was like really cute and sort of, like this handsome guy. And then this other guy was like tall, skinny, chain smoking, sort of Ichabod Crane looking guy. And I thought, I'm going to die on this jump I'm going to definitely die with the cute guy. If I'm going to die, I want to be attached to the cute guy, right? But then they assign so I get assigned to this chain smoking guy. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I'm up in the plane and I see my, at that point, fiance go out on the strut. He's holding onto the thing. And the next thing I know, he's gone. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. So again, it's like, I can't do it. I'm going to die. This is going to be horrible, blah, blah, blah. I somehow get out on this strut. I couldn't move my legs. I was like paralyzed. And so they drag me out. We're there. The guy goes, are you ready? I go, no. And he lets go of the strut and we start tumbling, because the only thing you have to remember to do, this is the one thing they're training you in, is to go like spread eagle so that the wind kind of and I'm like this in a fetal position, scared that I'm going to die. He pulls my arms open and all of a sudden it's like that, the wind. And then he says, are you ready to pull the parachute? I was like, you haven't pulled the parachute. So he pulls the parachute and everything ended up fine and I landed. But after that, I realized if I could do this with all those reasons and all those fears, and including what are people going to think about me? I'm the one who organized it, the whole thing, then I could do anything. And it really is like that. When you act on something, in spite of your fears, I didn't have to get rid of my fears. I brought them right with me. And if you can take action with your fears and your doubts and your limiting beliefs and your negative self-talk and your whatever, and then produce the result, you will have a new relationship to who you are and what you're capable of.
Yeah, and I think, when you try something new, you are going to fail, sometimes it's not going to be perfect from the beginning. So it is about getting up, readjusting your plan, and then trying again. But it's just about not giving up. And I think a lot of women, they feel like, okay, well, I can't do it. So I'm just gonna go back to, maybe they were just at the brim of success, but then they stop because they think it's too hard. And that's, what you've also been really speaking about at the past, when you go and you're going, but then you just, life throws so much stuff at you again then, and you get so triggered. How do you bounce back then and be like, okay, I'm gonna go on, I'm gonna stop.
That's exactly what I train people in. And it is a training, because you have to retrain your brain. You have to retrain your actions to take action when it seems counterintuitive. So the first thing is to identify what triggers you. See what are the red flags so that you know when you're being triggered. Most people are unconscious to it. So they're already so far down the road of being reactivated, they don't have any hope of pulling themselves out. But if you can be on the lookout for those things that it looks like when you're triggered, or when you're, as I call, being messable with, you get maybe a tight chest or a hot face or something that actually happens, like a symptom. I call it red flags. If you can be on the lookout for that, you can catch yourself before you go too far down that road. And then critical to the whole process of developing the new muscle is to pre-create a place to come from that is not in that world of reaction. So I have, for example, I have a woman who I coach, and she's married, and she knows that when her husband comes home from a trip, he's going to say something like, oh, you didn't do the laundry, or, he'll say something, and she gets triggered, like, you don't know what I've been through. You've been gone for a week. I've been taking care of the kid, like all of that is automatic. It's default. It's what I call reaction. She's not creating that. It's just like a brain pattern, right? So instead of going there, because she knows that's going to happen when he comes home, he's going to say something that she'll get hooked by. She's pre-created listening and interacting with him from a space of appreciation and love. So now she has that as another road to go to. If you don't create another road, even if you can be aware of your reaction, you have nothing else. So you're just going to go right back there. It's like a G-force. It'll suck you right back in. So having a pre-created space is critical, that you can then go, okay, when your husband says whatever he says, or your employer or employee says whatever they say that normally hooks you, you can go, okay, what would being loving and patient say or do right now? and you can act from that space. Or if it were in a business setting, what would, being compassionate and committed to excellence say right now, whatever you create. And it really doesn't matter what you create, Kristy, it's that you create something, because if you don't create something, your reactions are going to create you.
And then about the creating and everything, I know you spoke before about like, you have these to-do lists, and when you're accountable to other people, if you've made a promise to someone else, you do it. Well, most of us, then,
really, if you're a high performer, you do it,
yes. But then when it comes to ourselves, a lot of times we're like, oh, well, I didn't do it today, but I can do it tomorrow. And then you're actually not being very trustworthy to yourself. And this is also, with women who are unhappy in their career, they know they want to do something else, but they're just comfortable. They're comfortable in their job. They have a good paycheck. They have a good, good salary, good working conditions. And they're like, well, why should I even move? I want to move. I know I need to take these steps. I need to take these actionable steps, but I'll do it next year.
Yeah, and that's what people do. They kick it down the road. I call that the someday paradox.
Yes.
It's like, I'll do it someday. Someday I'll handle that. Someday I'll lose that last 10 pounds. Someday I'll, start my own business. Someday I'll move to Paris. That was my someday. I've been talking about moving to Paris for 40 years. 40 years. And for 20 years, like seriously talking about it. And then in a course that I was leading, that I designed, called the Foundation for Being Unmessable with, I was talking about someday dreams like that. I'm like, how many of you have something you're going to do someday? And I'm talking about how there's no someday in reality. And then I realized, wow, I have a someday dream. And someday is not a real day. So I don't care if it's a year from now, 2 years from now, if you don't have a by when you're going to take action on whatever it is that you're talking about, it isn't a real commitment. It's a someday, one day, maybe, but not now sort of concept. And it's not a real dream. It's a conceptual dream. So I work with people to distinguish between their dreams, like their real dreams, their inherited dreams, like default dreams that they have because somebody told them that they should, whether it's society or their parents or whatever, or, the other groups of people at work, oh, well, I should want to double my income, so I guess I'll just get in that game, but it's not really yours. And then also goals, which always have a by when. If you have a goal, if there's no by when, it's not a real goal. It's a let's do lunch someday.
So it's really about really being the creator of your life instead of reacting to what life throws at you. So really being at the driver's seat of your life instead of sort of waiting for things to happen and hoping. And how's your look then on, I don't know, do you know much about human design?
Little bit. I'm not an expert at it, so I wouldn't be able to talk like in a way that was masterful.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious about, because there's like the generator, and basically they need to wait for the invitation. And I sometimes feel like, well, that's if you're waiting for the invitation, then maybe you're going to be waiting for a very long time,
That's right. Well, I would definitely be anti that. Whatever that is, I'm not for that. And I train people in making requests or invitations because most people are horrible at it. And women specifically, I have found, are weak at it. Like men seem to be, and this is a very generic statement, it's not true all the time. So, but women seem to be weak at making requests for what they want. They'll say things like, oh, my back hurts. They don't say, will you give me a 10-minute back rub? Or they'll say, I could really use a raise, rather than I request that you give me a 10% raise by December 1st. And then just let the person deal with the request. So most human beings suck at making requests and invitations. And that is one of the key things that I work with people on who are into high performance or really producing high performance results, is you have to get good at making requests and invitations. I mean, I had that scenario for years. When I was younger, I didn't ask anybody for anything. I just did it all myself. And then when I had that breakthrough myself, I was able to unlock and unleash this whole world of making requests. And from that one thing, just being able to do that, I've raised over $90 million for charity. That's insane. I couldn't ask my father for $20 when I was growing up. I was so afraid to ask for things. But, you know, when you unlock it, you unlock it.
And yeah, so what would your advice be for women who are listening to this podcast now and they feel stuck, they want to do something else, but yeah, they're so scared of failing, so scared of getting out of their comfort zone,
yeah,
and so scared of what other people are going to think of them doing something completely different. Like, what are my parents going to think? What are my friends going to think?
You have to start with building that muscle. You can't just jump to the top of Mount Everest right away. You got to take one step and the next step and the next step. So I would advise building the muscle. Like, I have a lot of free resources on my website where people can start to do that. If they want to start to get connected to what could be their dream, they can watch my TED Talk, like you mentioned, you know, or they can do, if you want to start to get the muscle going of what it's like to say something, create something, and then fulfill on it, I have a free 5-day promise game that people can begin to engage with. So there's a lot of ways to do it without like hiring me. There's a ton of ways, because I want people to have this ability, you know, so that's my mission, is to make it available to as many people as possible. But I would start that way. I would start by, you know, getting connected to your dream source is what I call it. And that's the TED Talk. I also have a 5-day dream source discovery thing. It's not free, but it's like less than $50 or something. And then do the promise game, because that will give you the ability to intervene in your predictable future on little steps, but then you can make it bigger and bigger. So if you, for instance, make a promise, okay, I want to create happiness in my life. So I'm going to make a promise to make 5 people smile today. Now you're intervening in your predictable day. Your predictable day is not to go out, most likely, to make people smile, right? So every time you do it, you're interrupting a brain pattern of just getting stuff done, going through life. So if you can do that and see the result is, oh, and now I have happiness in these areas. Okay, what do I want to create at work? I want to create fulfillment. Okay, so now you craft promises that generate fulfillment. So you're coming from fulfillment and producing it at the very same time. This sounds a little conceptual. It won't be after you watch the TED Talk and kind of have some of the context around this, but that's the methodology. And you just have to start by doing one sit-up. You know, it's like you can't do 100 right at once, maybe, but you got to do 1 and then 2 and then 10 and then 20 and like that.
Yes, I think it's about taking small steps, not like, you know, they say, if you don't look at the whole staircase, but just look at the first step. So don't think so big, but you have maybe a big dream and then make it small into like a first small actionable step. Do it, see you're able to do it, you get the confidence, and then you get out and you keep on doing and keep on doing. And also that even though you fail, even though things don't work out, just readjust your plan, go again.
Well, there's a whole way to debrief your performance to see what was at the source of your failure or the source of your success. Most people don't do that. They just have successes and they hope for the next one, rather than, okay, what did I do that resulted in that? Or what didn't I do? Like I stopped doing that resulted in that. So the step-by-step is very critical. But I will say that's kind of contradicting that is there are times where you don't have to go baby steps. It's just something opens up for you. You see something like the thing about Someday in Paris. Mm-hmm. Within a month, I had my visa, I had an apartment. You know, it was like all of a sudden it just no longer was stopping me because I saw it as a blind spot. And when you eliminate a blind spot, when you see it, it goes away. And then you also eliminate a limit or a constraint. So you can just be in action and produce results very quickly. That happened for me in my early 20s when I had a limiting belief that I didn't know was a limiting belief. I thought it was the truth, which is you can't do your art as your career. And I had wanted to be a singer since I was 4, but I thought you couldn't do that. You had to do it on the side, right? And when I saw that was not the truth, it was a decision I made at 5, you know, not exactly the most, you know, genius human being at 5 years old, but I made a decision and I thought it was true. When that disappeared as the truth, within 3 months, I had a record deal and that record went #1. So things can happen super quick if you completely disappear the wall or the stop or the thing that's messing with you. But you can also do it little by little until it totally disappears.
Yeah, I've also spoken to other coaches who, like are super successful, earning a lot of money, and they also say, look, the fear is still there, but I act on it anyway. So it's not like if you're super successful in there, you're not going to have any more triggers or any more feelings.
No, not at all.
But I think the art is to really be able to accept that they're there and to be able to work with it and live with it and definitely work on. But triggers will always come in, they say every level has another devil. So maybe you've worked on some things, you grow, you develop, and then you're at a new level, and then new things will come trigger you.
That's my whole business. I mean, I work with very successful people, but everybody has something that messes with them. Everybody, whether it's a relationship or a thought pattern or whatever, it's all there. So I like the every level has another, a new devil, because it really is, doesn't matter whether you're a teenager or a billionaire. There's something to disappear, the next level of disappearance. And that's what I deal with people, which is really so awesome, because it's like a mountain with no top. So there's never any place to get to with this. It's just what's the next thing to develop. And I wouldn't, you have fear. Yeah, absolutely. Like my skydiving story. The fear didn't go away. I jumped anyway, right? But it's like, fear is like a fingernail, you can't do anything. It's okay, you have a fingernail, but doesn't have to stop you from taking action. It's like, yeah, I'll bring my fingernail with me. I'm not going to work on my fingernail. I'm going to work on developing the muscle to take the action to fulfill on my dream. The more you focus on the fingernail, the more it's going to be in the way. Maybe the fingernail's not a good analogy. That's sort of broke down, but it's like, I tried it, but I don't think I'll use that one again.
And then one more thing, because this is also, I think, a really big thing for most women, because we are social beings. That on the one hand, we want to stand out, we want to be different, but on the other hand, we really want to belong to the group, to the tribe. And how do you deal with when, you are so worried about what other people think of what you're going to do, like your parents and friends, like what's, because that can really like stop you, that yeah. Worry.
Well, I would assert it really isn't about what other people think. It's about what you say to yourself. Because, for instance, if I said, Kristy, you're an artichoke, what would you say to me?
Well, that's not true.
Exactly. It's not going to upset you that I think you're an artichoke, because it's absurd. And you have no doubt that you're not an artichoke. But if I say, oh, Kristy, you're not that smart, or you're not that pretty, or you're not, whatever it is that you have a doubt about, it's never what somebody says. It's what you say to yourself. Mm. So really what messes with you is what you're saying, not what they're saying. And that's part of what I work with people. It's to develop the ability to be unmessable with no matter what somebody says, because it's never what they say. It's what you, like, for instance, when I was 5 and my father had been an artist and he'd stopped painting. And I said to him in the car, I was like, why'd you stop painting? He said, well, you can't do your art as your career. Now, he said that, but it doesn't matter what he said. He said a million things to me that I didn't listen to over my life, right? I said in that moment, you can't do your art as your, and that was it. It wasn't that he said it. It's that I said it. And anything you say to yourself can mess with you.
So actually, also, if you feel triggered by someone, it actually shows you what you think about yourself.
Yeah, full-length mirror. Life's a full length. You spot it, you got it.
So that's something that you need to then change your belief about that particular area in your life that is triggering you.
Yeah, I would say it's not so much changing your belief, because beliefs are sort of a superficial level. It's more shifting how that area occurs for you or shows up for you, because, I don't have to believe that I'm not stupid. I don't have to believe that or not believe it. It's just, if I occur for myself as not bright, then that's gonna, I might have all the evidence in the world that I'm really smart. I have a PhD, I have this, I have that. Doesn't matter what you believe, it's how it shows up for you. So, it's like, it's a deep conversation, because belief is something people are a bit addicted to. It's kind of like they become their beliefs. But have you ever had a belief that changed over time? Like all of a sudden now you don't believe in Santa Claus or whatever. Believing in something doesn't make it real.
Well, for me, it's really been taking action. Like I said, that before I believed, okay, I couldn't do this, which was true. Say with the CrossFit, I couldn't do so.
Right.
But by taking action, I got stronger. And then all
Yes.
of a sudden I could do it. And I was like, oh, wow, I actually can do it because I was practicing it.
Yeah. Well, but before you started practicing it, I would say you created a word. You created your word to it. I'm going to do this. Now, all of a sudden, you have a promise, whether it's to yourself or to your trainer that you hired or whatever. But there is a promise out in the world created by word. And your word is critical in the art of being unmessable with. It's all about how unmessable with your word is. Because if you create, being at the gym, however many times with the CrossFit, now your word is giving you your actions versus your feelings and your thoughts and your fears giving you your actions.
But I also sometimes wonder, okay, and I definitely agree with the whole word, to keep your word, but sometimes we can also be so hard on ourselves that when we don't do something, that we then break ourselves down. Okay, see, you didn't keep your word, so that you don't even bother anymore. How would you, in those times, like this has got really to do with self-love then, when you feel like you didn't, how do you then bring yourself up again?
Yeah. Well, first I need to distinguish between keeping your word and honoring your word, because they're two different things. You might not always keep your word, the plane might be canceled or whatever might happen, but it's always 100% of the time possible to honor your word. So if I say, and again, I keep using the gym because it just seems like so easy, but you could use this with anything. If I say I'm going to go to the CrossFit gym on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that's my word, right? So now I have that in my calendar. That's the future I created. Then Sunday night, I get COVID or whatever happens, it's still my word. So I can take that word and move it. I could say, okay, I said I was going to do Monday at 9, but now I'm not going to do that. I'm going to now move it to a week from now when I'm cured or whatever, So now I am moving it as a matter of my word. Now, if there's an impact on someone else, the minute I see I'm not going to be keeping my promise to the other person, I get in communication with them. I know I told you I'd meet you tomorrow at 9. You don't wait till 8:55 and go, oh, by the way, I'm not feeling well, because that's not honoring your word. You have a word. You see it's not going to be kept. That moment you get in communication with whoever that's going to have an impact on, and you deal with it as a person of your word. You say, listen, I know it's not 24 hours. I'll pay you for the session because I don't want you to be impacted with your income because I am canceling. So you deal with whatever the impact is as a person of your word. That's called honoring your word.
Yeah, makes sense. And one last question, maybe this is a bit deep, but I think all of us are here, maybe on Earth, we want to try and find out who we really are in the core, without all the layers and all the conditioning. Like, we all wearing kind of masks in order to be liked, accepted, and fit in. And therefore we might be we're sitting in a job right now that's not making us happy, but it's making our parents happy, or all our friends are doing a certain job like this. And that's why we're in this job for the outside world, to belong to the group. And how do we break free from that and find out who we are without all the layers and conditioning?
Well, first you have to identify those things that are there by inheritance or default that aren't your creation. Because even if you fulfill on a goal or a dream that's inherited by society or you're not going to be satisfied. Ultimately, you might be satisfied for like 3 seconds, but then it's just going to be the next carrot that you're chasing. So until you're the authentic author of what you're creating, satisfaction is fleeting. It's not sustainable. So I work with people. This is part of my course. The Unmessable with Foundation is literally identifying all those inherited default dreams so that you can put them to the side and create newly what your life's about. What is your calling, your raison d'etre? What really do you want to say your life fulfilled at the end of your life? And rather than waiting till the end of your life to fulfill on it, come from that place so that you are literally living the life of your dreams versus dreaming about it.
Yeah, and I think this should be a wake-up call, to all women listening right now to this podcast, that it is really not too late to change your life around, to change your career around. You can study something else, you can do something else.
Or you might stay doing the same thing you're doing, but you're going to alter the context in which you're doing it. I'll just share briefly about somebody that I was coaching who worked for a juice company, hated it, was selling juice, hated every day, was starting to like come in late and think about quitting. What else could they do? Blah, blah, blah. So then I was working with them and I said, well, why did you start working at the juice company to begin with? Like, what was the vision that you had? And I could barely get to it, but eventually got to that they wanted to make a difference in people's well-being. And they saw juice as a pathway to really impacting people's well-being. And I said, oh, okay, so you're not selling juice, you're impacting people's well-being. And they were like, what? So all of a sudden they had a new lens for their job. Mm-hmm. And they went in the next day and actually loved their job because it was a pathway to fulfill on what they were committed to, not just hacking juice.
That's really a different way of looking at it. I found it really interesting. Yeah. And then you feel just so more motivated to doing it. Because you feel like you're doing something good for the world.
Exactly. So
and
what's the why? Like, why are you in that job?
Yeah.
And if you don't have a why, create one.
Create a why. And that's what I just want to mention about what I talked about, the talent scan that I offer, because that is just so amazing. It's like a test that goes to your subconscious, and it shows you what your natural talents are that you didn't even know you had. But also, what are you doing right now that doesn't give you energy? And I think that's totally just such an eye-opener. I think a lot of people don't realize that maybe some tasks that they're doing, it's not giving them energy. So rather delegate that to someone else and focus on developing the skills that really naturally suits you. So even within that job that you have, maybe you can focus on other things in that job.
Yes, totally.
I
have people do similarly, like what you're talking about energy. I have something called an action result energy audit. So people track their actions, the result it's producing, and whether it gives them energy or sucks their energy for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing what you start to see about what you're actually engaging with and whether it's producing a result or not, first of all. But if it's not producing a result and it's sucking your energy, why are you doing that?
And this is also what I think is a great thing about coaching, is just to see this, because a lot of us, we're just going through the motion and just doing these things, but they need to be aware of these things. Like, yes, that's the great thing with coaching, that you can become aware. Oh, okay, I can live my life completely different. I can change my whole life around.
Totally. And, all good coaches have coaches, and I have 3 coaches because I can't see everything. What do I can only see what I can see. But they can see, and a good coach will see what you can't see, so you can be who you want to be.
Wow. Do you have any last words, any last golden nuggets that you want to say to them?
I would just say start practicing with promising. Just create a promise every day and then just see what happens, like I promise to forgive somebody today, and then just do that. Or I promise to appreciate 10 people in my life for the difference they made for me. Whatever you create, that's going to get you out of your ordinary going through lifeness. Start to shake it up a bit with your word, because your word can be your wand. You can create magic with your word.
Wow. Thank you, Josselyne, for this really inspiring podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, it's great talking to you too.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for listening. I would like to ask you to please rate this podcast so that I can get a high in the ranking and that more people can find me. And if you know someone who could benefit from listening to it, then please share it with them. Thank you, and till next time.